Hi there. Thanks for coming along to our breakfast event to showcase some of our micro-learning speakers around project and program management. We're not quite ready yet. We're still sorting things out, getting the technology up and running so we can all be ready for you. So in the meantime, have a look at a few of these snippets and it'll give you a bit of a taster as to some of the other micro-learning modules that we've got, some of the speakers we've got coming up in store over the next 12 months. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Projects in the OGC world, in MSP and Prince world, exist to deliver outputs. And what do we mean by it? PMI calls them deliverables. It's a thing. Usually it means you can have your photograph taken next to it. You know, you can, if you can tap it, it's an output.
Risks and issues on programs.
So when you've got a whole load of things on your risk register, have a look through them and go, well, what are the causes that we have? What are the big answers to lots of these things? But it's useful to say, am I looking at an effect or a cause when you're looking at the risk register?
Oh, hi. Thanks for coming back. We're still getting the cameras ready. We're still getting everyone positioned so we can do the broadcast really well for you. So look, have a look at a few more of these micro-learning snippets. So you get a bit of a taster of what's in store. Again, talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging by. Cheers.
What are the benefits of vaccinating children against flu? Well, presumably it means the kids don't get flu. They can go to school, their exam scores improve, their education improves. They don't give flu to other kids at school. That's good. That's a benefit. It's a measurable improvement. We can measure the amount of days that kids have off school because they do measure it. We can do this stuff.
A team member may say something like, this new project is negatively affecting our team, and that's not being taken into consideration at all. So an active listener could respond by reflecting back. What I'm hearing you say is this new project will have negative consequences for your team. So I'm not parroting back, I'm reflecting back what I'm hearing in my own words.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much again for joining us. Now, we're just showing you a few of these snippets, so you've got a bit of a taster of what the micro-learning is all about. We've got a couple of presenters coming up shortly to speak to you. It's all sort of around the micro-learning for project and program managers. So we're still getting the lights all sorted and getting the microphones on and things like that. So just bear with us for a few more moments and you should be good to go, okay? So we'll definitely be seeing you soon. Cheers.
Project, Program and Portfolio Management Maturity Model, P3M3 Maturity Levels.
So at level 1 maturity, which we call awareness, so there's kind of a process awareness, they are kind of the fun places to work, right? Because every project's exciting for them because they've got no idea what's going to happen.
Establishing an enterprise project management office.
One of the key things is spending a lot of time on problem definition. understanding, and obviously the same for projects, right? What are we actually trying to resolve here? Are we all clear? Are we all agreed? It takes a lot of time to do that.
I don't know. Is this the right cable? I can't work it out. Look, we're going to be just taking a little bit longer to get this ready. We've got a few cables here that we're not quite sure where they're meant to go. But once we've got those in, we'll be up and running. So look, keep enjoying yourself watching these micro learning snippets. They'll no doubt give you a bit of knowledge around project and program management. So yeah, talk to you soon. Cheers.
Ponder this. We typically divide projects into work packages. We divide programs into projects. There's inevitably an overlap. Should I run a big, complicated project with big, complicated work packages? Or should I run a simple program with specific projects in it? One person's big, complicated work package is another person's simple project. And organizations will make different choices.
Multiple diverse infections.
When they scan your temperature, if it was above 37 or something, you were a potentially polar carrier. Now, the problem is in a country like Sierra Leone, your humidity is hot. We're right in the midst of malaria season. And then you've got huge HIV cases going on as well.
Morena whānau, Auckland. Welcome to the CC Learning Networking event on this I can see the sun just rising ahead of me. I'm broadcasting from Huapai in West Auckland at my mum's house on quite a cold, beautiful morning. We've got people from around the world online via YouTube and LinkedIn. Joining me here with Rob England and Patrice Price, both in Wellington, and I suspect it's pretty cold in Wellington. So kia ora, everyone. Thanks for being up so early for this event, and thank you, Patrice and Rob, for joining us this morning on Wednesday. Hopefully you've got a coffee, and hopefully you're feeling like you're willing to listen to some project management talks. So I'd like to do a call out to all those joining us in New Zealand and beyond. We've got people from Australia and other locations around the world. Thanks for joining us either as live participants or watching the recorded session at probably what it's going to be a more sensible hour, so well done for that. Please ask questions via YouTube or the LinkedIn chat. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn channel to get future notifications. To ask a question or post on YouTube, you're going to need to have subscribed, so please do that immediately. Now, I'll be helping you out in the chat if you've got any chat questions, and really happy to hear from you and to hear where you are. So please remember to continue the conversation and post messages both online and at your workplace. It would help us if you shared this event to promote it for next time. Now, I'm going to introduce Rob. So Rob England, he's here today to talk to us about open management, beyond business agility. In this presentation, Rob's using his expertise to explore how open management concepts improve work, better results, working lives, and better society. Ideas of work are changing globally beyond agility to include humanity, complexity, and adaptability. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I know Teal Unicorn produce great results with their clients, and Rob's going to share some stories about that. So let's change over to Rob. Rob, I'm going to change over to you now.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm coming here to you from here in Wellington, so it's still dark here, which is not my optimal time. I work out of Wellington here with my wife, Dr. Cherry Vu, and we call ourselves Teal Unicorn. And we focus on changing at an organizational level how people work. And our primary insight in that domain is that you can't change how people work until you change how you manage the work and how you manage the managers. Until the management system changes, it's impossible for people to actually change how they work. And we see this failure over and over again when the directive goes out to work agile or work DevOps or work lean, or I don't care what it is. All these attempts to move to better ways of working fail if the management don't also change how they manage the work to allow these new ways of working to happen. So that's what we do. And we do a lot of that work these days in Vietnam, and we're having wild success there because we get very good levels of executive access in Vietnam. Cherry is influential there, and that allows us to have some wonderful success because we can get the ear of management to change the management systems. And so we work with big clothing companies. This is probably one of their shirts. They increased output by 90% in 1 year. We work with one of the biggest banks in Vietnam, and with each of their divisions around the country. And one of their divisions, sales increased by 150% in 10 weeks. And every division we've worked with have moved into the top 10 divisions in the country. There's 26, I think. And so on and so on. We work with fashion manufacturers, online retail, like TV advertising retailers, a big finance organization. They grew 50% new customers and 20% increased revenue within a week of adopting new ways of working. So crazy numbers, not tiny little 5 or 10% improvements, but real big major step change improvements in how they work within months or a year. And so, how do we do that? So we call it open. We apply the principles of open thinking, and we use that word because people use the word agile and agility mostly to talk about the sort of things we're talking about, but that word is overworked, and we ask too much of it, we think. So open is a better word to be an umbrella across all of the concepts that contribute to better ways of working, and especially better ways of managing. And you hear open every day around us. Open architecture, open source, open access, open space, open leadership, open innovation. These phrases come up all the time. So it's a word that's in common use to talk about the sort of things we're talking about, which is, we say open work. So opening up the organization like a flower. And so when you use that word open in the context of work, it makes it creates many different concepts or images in our minds that are appropriate, like open to let the light in and let the air in, or open to make room for people to move and to do their own jobs, or open to expose the workings of the organization and be able to see in and make it transparent. Open as in inclusive and inviting people in, and invitational management, and embracing diversity, open to the future and creating possibilities, open to other organizations and allowing pollination of ideas, and open to let the value out and to let the organisation be the best that it can and deliver to its potential. So you see, the word open has many different connotations that are all appropriate for what we're talking about. And that gets a bit hippie for some people when I talk about that. So there are more concrete concepts that are in not common use, unfortunately, but that people talk about around the world that we would call better ways of working that are being adopted, that are emergent around the world. And so the concept of slack in systems, and there's a wonderful book called Slack, and creating headroom and capacity to do work. The concepts of visualization of work. We're just putting the finishing touches on a book called Working Naked about visualizing work. The concepts of complexity and complex systems and complex adaptive system thinking. The diversity and inclusion movement around the world. Agile, obviously, and business agility. The idea of networking and networked value and networks of co-creation. Humanocracy is a big influencer on us, which is the name of a book, but is also we use it as a term for the humanistic ideas to restore humanity to the workplace. And psychological safety is a big movement in work around the world. So they're all examples of the kind of things that are going on around the planet that we would gather together as open work. And we bunch it all into three big areas. We talk about human, systems, adaptability. So all the human stuff, all the system stuff, and the adaptability of the organisation, which is a combination of agility and resilience. So Agile's still in there, but it's only one piece of a much bigger puzzle, we think, and it's too much to use that word for all of it, so we use open. And then, as I said, you can't change to those better ways of working unless you change how you manage the work. So we therefore focus on management when we're working with an organisation, and we spend a lot of time coaching and training and persuading everyone from the board down, or usually from the CEO down and up into the board, to understand why they need to change how they manage in order to get these good things and to get these great results. So our motto is, as I think Scott said, is better results, better lives, and better society. So we do unlock a lot of money. We do unlock a lot of value for the organisation, which gets the attention at the highest levels. But we also create better lives for the people doing the work so that they're happier, which is how we unlock all that. They're productive, they're engaged, they're feeling good. And so that's actually the most important part for us. And then we lift the values of the organisation so that the organisation is a better citizen, is a better contributor to the society around it. And so we get their attention. And the people part is I won't say easy, but is easier, right? People will change how they work if you let them, and if you enable them, and if you make it possible. Then offering a better way of working is actually not that hard. People will, and we very much do it with people, not to people. So we talk to people to say, how can you work better? Well, what should it look like? And they create the solutions, not us. Please stop asking us the answer. Consultants have got to stop coming in and just telling everybody how to work. Don't do it to people. That fails. So yeah, we collaborate, we get them to collaborate to come up with solutions. That's fairly easy once you get management out of the way, and once you have a style of management which encourages and enables people to do that. And so that kind of management, we sum it up, open management, funnily enough, and we have a book by that name. And 4 main attributes to open management, we think, is that it should be invitational. So you can't make knowledge workers do anything. You can only ask them to do good work. You can only create a space for them to do good work and motivate them to do good work. So invitational management is big for us. It should be inclusive management. So that's embracing the diversity of the organisation, and that's including everybody in the decision-making process. And then it should be inverted, flip the hierarchy. So instead of imagining the management hierarchy as a structure sitting on top of the people doing the real work who have to carry it around, think of the hierarchy as a inverted pyramid that holds up the real work, holds up the value, and servant management. That management exists to serve and support the people doing the work. So an inverted power structure, an inverted hierarchical structure, and it still all rests on you, CEO. You are still the most important part because it all sits on you. So we still play to the egos, but we flip the thinking that it should be inverted, and then finally that it should be transparent, and that all management decision making and management activity is open and transparent to the organisation and makes it transparent. I haven't given much examples yet. So a nice extreme example of that is several organisations that we've worked with. We've persuaded them to completely open the books so that the finances are all completely transparent to everybody working in the organisation, and everyone knows where the money's coming from and where it's going to and how much money there is and who's getting paid what. And so we have open salary, open payment systems in some of our clients that we've managed to get to that point. And so they can see that we're not making money right now and that this has to improve over here, and just completely open books. We've done that several times. So open management, moving to these better ways of managing people. Again, around the world, you'll hear talk about transformational leadership and the 5 aspects of transformational leadership. So we do coach the very senior management in the organisation about the behaviours of transformational leadership. Servant leader, which we call servant manager because it is actually about management. But these ideas of servant leader that are out there. Fair process, capital F, capital P, fair process from the Blue Ocean Group as ways of the group making decisions in such a way that you will get consent, not necessarily consensus. Not everyone may think it's a good idea, but everyone will consent to the decision and say it was fair enough. And sociocracy and holacracy and Camelot and all these sort of models of distributed power and democratic decision making. These are the kind of things that are going on around the world that we would group together as open management. And so we have clients who have no managers anymore. There's a luxury watch group in Vietnam who have 25 stores, and they're a big organization, and there are two owners who manage from the top, but they only have what they call supporters now, who are people who help organize and facilitate things so that the staff can run the shops and the distribution centers and the repair and all the branches of their organization are self-managing. Real estate removed all the management out of a real estate organization. So it's a bit threatening to talk about this, so you have to be careful. But we don't just do away with management overnight, but a few of them get to none at all, and others get to reduce management, and others get to management just focusing on more important things than micromanaging people and shouting. So it's a spectrum. But these ideas of open management are what turn the place on. They're what enable people to do the work. And so we move the organizations, or help them move to an employee first thinking, not customers first, not shareholders first, not even stakeholder capitalism and all stakeholders first, but employees first. And from that, achieving the high performance and the productivity. So this is the heart of what we do, and we're also talking about open IT at the moment. So a lot of the people watching this will work in the IT sector, and so we've got a initiative for the rest of this year to really define what it means specifically for IT management and IT ways of working, contextualizing it into IT if you're interested. So we can be found at tealunicorn.com to find out more about that. And I'll just close with mentioning a couple of books if people are interested in delving deeper into this. And we can send links out later, Scott. But my favourite place to start on this is a book called Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan. And the other great one to look at is Humanocracy that I mentioned before by Gary Hamel and Michelle Cisnini. So both of those, well, Humanocracy was very influential on us, and I think Brave New Work is a great place to start with diving into this stuff. So that's open management, and we're having a great deal of success and results that we have trouble getting people to believe we're getting. So we're quite passionate about getting people to get on board with that and come along with it. And we're not looking for work. We've got plenty of that. We're just trying to get these ideas out to the world so we can make work better, better results and better lives for the people doing the work. And with that, I'm interested if there are any questions or discussion at all, Scott.
I've been waiting in the wings, desperate with a series of questions wanting to ask. but actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold back and I'm going to say, Patrice, welcome. Tell me, Patrice, what your thoughts are on this crazy open work, open thinking stuff that Rob's talking about, which I think is pretty cool. But I want to.
It is indeed, but as Robert said, it's very confronting. And, what you have is a lot of people who have built their working lives and their attitudes to work over many years, in some cases decades. The type of, the various people that Rob will be meeting would be in that position. And you're asking people to make a real personal and emotional change. And that's confronting and difficult for a lot of people. I mean, we just have to examine, even in our ordinary lives, some of the things that we've been had asked to change. When I think about the post-COVID world in particular, people have had to examine so much about how they think, what they do, what they're willing to, how should we say, what they were willing to live with and for going forward.
Hmm.
So, it's really, really interesting to see these things coming out. And it will be interesting to see how, as the years go by, what that means for us from an organizational as well as an individual,
Yeah.
in a way. So, uh, hats off to you, Rob. Sometimes I think I would love to be the mouse in the corner when you're having some of these conversations, actually.
It is.
So
It
yes,
is.
I mean that's my first thoughts about it. And I think when I get to, I'm not preempting, but when I get to my discussion, it will be interesting to see how that dovetails with Rob's work.
It
Uh,
is. It is very interesting. The resistance
yeah.
and the difficulty people have, and so we do spend a lot of time coaching at the middle management level and training
I would think
to
so.
bring them along. There's a number, and we work with. I mean, like banking is as conservative in Vietnam as it is anywhere in the world, and there are divisions of the bank where the heads of those divisions are going, not having anything to do with it. That's not how you run a bank. And it's only the progressive, may I say, all women that engage with us to make a difference. But the board is not ignoring the fact that these divisions that we work with are soaring up the ladder table, and so there's money on the table that these grumpy old men are refusing
Yep.
to pay, and so they won't be allowed to do that for long. So there's a pressure there, and a lot of people are not silly. They're survivors. They got to where they are in management, so they sniff the wind and they and then there's another bunch of managers who want to be nice, but they're I'm not sure of how much I can cuss, Scott, but I joke that it's not in the job description for management to be an arsehole,
Indeed.
right? And yet there are so many managers who think the only way to manage is to be an arsehole, to shout at people and to be hard and to be cruel, right? And I heard of an organization where the CEO has management meetings at midnight just to harden up his management team.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
there are some managers who think that's the only way. We've had a number of managers who, when we say, it's okay to be nice, they're like, well, what? It's a relief to them to be permissioned to have a different management style. And
Tell me, sorry to interrupt. Tell me though, is this something that we see in the New Zealand context as well? Is this, like, what I'm thinking is that now you'll have to excuse me, I'm completely ignorant of the Vietnamese general management style, and maybe I'm ignorant of the New Zealand management style, and that this is actually kind of common in New Zealand as well. I know there are individuals out there, but is this a common thing you'd expect in other locations? I mean, or is this something you've found in particular sectors of, either it's at that high level culture within Vietnam, or what is it about it? Tell me, is this common or not?
It's not. It's not a cultural difference. I'm sure of that. I mean, I've worked a lot with big government in New Zealand, and I've worked a lot with big corporates in New Zealand, and a little bit with SMEs in New Zealand. and around the region too. And I've worked in Australia and in Singapore, and so and even a bit in Korea. I mean, and of course, I've had stuff to do with US organisation corporates, and I think it's universal that the 20th century management is about power and compelling people to do things. Right? It's not invitational, and it's not inverted, and everywhere 20th century management. There are managers who try to be nice within that framework, but the framework is one of asymmetric power, and we will make you do the things we want you to do. And,
Right. Okay.
And so that's universal. And so some people interpret that as being a prick, right? And some people interpret it as, sorry guys, but I have to do this. But either way, it's bad management. And it worked in the 20th century. It doesn't work with knowledge workers, and it doesn't work in a highly volatile environment where we have to be constantly changing how we work.
Yeah.
And so it works in factories, but it ain't going to work in the service and information and knowledge industries of the 20. It doesn't work. People are already finding it doesn't work, and so that's one of the reasons they're more open to this too, is they're floundering, they're struggling, and I see that everywhere. So I worked with, so all the major banks in New Zealand are owned by Australian banks. And so I can, without naming any specific bank, I can say I worked with a New Zealand bank that was owned by an Australian bank. And they had the most incredibly punitive culture where if an IT person made a mistake that impacted production, they lost their quarterly bonus and it went as a red mark on their employment record. And that was coming from the Australian head office, right? So that shows zero understanding of failure in an IT context, and that's just failure is unacceptable. All failure will be style of management, you know.
And do you think this goes to something that I know you've done, and that is you've got a number of books, parenting books, that talk about this open thinking and use it. And I'm a big believer. I'm a parent myself, and so I'm a big believer that the way I bring up my children is a way they will interact with people, either in management positions or not. You know, just talking in the street. And I hate to be a bit Freudian and going back to, your childhood type thing, but I think it's kind of true, right? And I kind of think that maybe you think that too, on the basis that you saw that open thinking could benefit parents as well. Yeah.
So that is a cultural difference, and Vietnam is deeply old-fashioned about parenting. And so one of the sort of the non-profit arm of Teal Unicorn is that we promote what we would in New Zealand consider more normal, still progressive ways of parenting, right? Yeah. Still, I think and building more on my failures as a parent than my successes, I have to say. But still, these progressive ideas of parenting, introducing those to Vietnam to try and make the lives of a lot of teenagers better over there. And we're more famous in Vietnam for that. We've been on national television and the books are bestsellers in Vietnam because they're embracing those ideas at a scale. But absolutely, there's a huge crossover there, and that's culturally more different. But I think in the business context, not so much. I think it's universal around the world. I don't know what you think, Patrice, but
the thing is, I find it quite extraordinary that I'm still shocked at that banking example and the punitive thing, because I come from a finance background. I like to say that when I left university, I grew up in a bank. And even so, when I going back in my career and my training, one of the reasons I find that extraordinary is that when I got into assurance, and I'll talk about it more when I have my little speech. One of the things the framework that I grew up in was the capability maturity model coming out of the Carnegie Mellon University in the United States. And in that model, one of the basic premises is that you don't punish people, you examine the process, because typically the issue is the process, and it will have to be quite an exhaustive examination of the process to be able to say that somebody is not performing because of personal issues. Now that's HR. Once you realize it's not the process and it goes to person, that now becomes an HR issue. It's no longer a technology issue. It's no longer, management of the development factory. None of that. But to immediately go to the point that, okay, this is a person problem rather than let's examine the process. How did we set up this person not to perform? And I think that goes back to the management aspect of it. If you want to say I'm the manager, basically then as a manager, I have to say, what went wrong with the process? How did this person not perform? Did we set them up for failure? And I think that is the conversation that we should be had before docking people's pay and all this kind of thing. I just find that extraordinary that that is still there, because I mean, when I went into assurance, we're looking in late 1990s, early 2000s. So to be in 2023 and that kind of stuff still going on, shocking. Sorry, shocking.
And that's an extreme example, but that basic failure is unacceptable thinking I find everywhere in government and corporates in New Zealand. There's still not the real understanding of failure that it's a systemic issue that you're talking about. Just don't see it.
Okay, we'll have to move on. I still actually have another 6 questions I wanted to ask you, Rob, but I'll have to do it afterwards. Okay, so these breakfast events, they're based around our lessons library. We've interviewed project and program experts and project managers to create the world's largest depository of project lessons. We're capturing all these lessons, so you don't have to, and you can license our library if you're interested in doing that. Now, I'd like to introduce to you Patrice Price. You've already heard from her talking in the discussions. She's going to talk to us about director to mentor, the evolution of leadership styles. She's a principal advisor in governance, assurance, and benefits at Oranga Tamariki. She's going to give us a presentation on the evolution of these styles, explore personal stories of triumphs and trials in early leadership roles, with a focus on the courage to expose ideas and embrace critique. Let's learn how embracing vulnerability and shedding perfectionism paves the way for effective leadership. Would you believe that ChatGPT wrote that? So thank you very much to ChatGPT. Yes. So let's move over to Patrice now. If I push the buttons in the right order, it should work. There we go. You're on. That was quick.
It's been an absolute pleasure listening to Rob, and I'm really feeling fortunate to be part of this discussion group online. So, as Scott just said, I am the principal advisor at Oranga Tamariki. Now, Oranga Tamariki is the Ministry for Children, quite the departure from my earlier banking experience, and it has been quite the learning experience to shift from private sector to government, and of course into this very important section of government, which is helping Fano, supporting Fano to make sure at the end of the day our children reach the full potential. So, like I say, I've been there for a little over 2 years, and it's been quite the ride. So, one of the things I'd like to say is, of course, I've been in the trenches as a project manager, but right now I support project managers and project teams and actually a lot of non-project people in this area of, governance, assurance, and benefits. Um, it's early in the morning, so this discussion is not going to be too much about P3M3. In fact, it's not really going to talk about concepts of P3M3. What I want you all to do here now is to sort of sit back and take a breath and encourage you to sort of reflect on your own personal journey as a project manager. I remember, and I can't forget it, it was September the 11th, and I knew exactly where I was. I was in Trinidad. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. And there was a conference going on while on that day, and it was a project management conference. It was PMI, and at that conference, I remember there was one session I looked at, and it said, and the title or subtitle, depending on what you want to look at it, was Project Management Being Politics 101. And it always stayed with me, apart from the unfortunate situation on that day. But what stayed with me is that someone would talk about project management as politics 101. So let's examine, I don't want to examine it in detail, but what does it mean for you as a project manager on your journey? Um, and it's all, as Rob had said before, an examination of management styles. So, what I want you to do is sort of sit back and think, is your current management style working for you? And exactly what is working for you, in quotes. And the other thing I want you to think about is, what will it be in the future? What are your hopes for it to be in the future? And then again, how you're planning to get there. The funny thing about things like this is that there's no particular prescription. This is very much a personal journey. But what I want you to think about and ask yourself is, are you going about it in a very deliberate fashion? Being a PM is quite the bumpy ride. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here about what that means. But the main thing is to be deliberate about where you hopefully want to be and where you want to be. Okay? And to ensure that you sort of get the outcomes that you're looking for, which that means, of course, understanding what's the outcome that you're looking for and understanding where you want to be. Um, what I'm going to do is sort of illustrate it using my own experience. And let me say from the outset, I wasn't deliberate about it at all. It just sort of moved. Um, so even so, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been working for quite some time here. And I think I am where I want to be. So my baptism of fire as a project manager and a new project manager as that was in a transformation program in a bank, which was in a highly competitive environment and with a distributed team. And the thing about it, of course, is that in those days, you didn't know anything about programs or transformation or distributed teams. So basically, I was in a situation that was completely unknown, and I was having to make my way through it. So of course, one of the management styles I adopted is very much the director mode. Gantt charts, work breakdown structures, the whole lot. Um, and the thing about it is, where it came, you had all of that, but you also had the burnout. All right. And along the way, I lost some good people. So I could say to myself, once I reflected on it, is that the outcome that I wanted? I got the project in. Due to some technical snafu, it was only a week late. So from the point of view of the project itself, it was a success, but the burnout was there. And of course, there was the issue of losing good people from my team. So after I left the bank, and it was soon after that, I found myself in a sort of, where will I want to go and what I'm going to do, and to sort of examine, what is Patrice Price supposed to do for the next however many decades of my working life. So I joined an offshore software development company. And I could see that my management style was starting to shift. And I was more looking towards being a servant leader, servant manager, as Rob just mentioned. And um, while I was in this company, this software company, I was in quality assurance. Now, one of the things, and this is where I was introduced to CMM, and again, one of the things that came out of this assurance model that I was adopting was that it wasn't about audit. It was more about building capability and, as we say in New Zealand, mana. Um, and I really love that word. As I said, I learned that word here in New Zealand, where it's about, yes, not only is this person working with me, for me, what have you, but it was about, as a quality assurance person, coming out of every conversation, every meeting, was this person's manner better, higher, and were they more capable? And that switch from director to servant leader, I think, was a key change for me and in my life. And I continued on that vein, or at least attempted to continue on that vein. It's now all about, I saw myself not, sort of, am I directing here, or am I nurturing good people? And I think that's the question that kept coming up in my brain as I worked and interacted with people in project teams and project managers. You find yourself doing more advising, and talking about the processes, and does this work for you, is a term that I kept using. Is this working for you? And basically pretty much accepting that people are good. They're here, they've reached a stage, they're good. And very often it's about getting out of the way and just supporting them as they move forward. And we've got we call, the Maoris have a boat that they call the waka. And what I found is that it's better to be at the stern, the back of the waka, providing the support, rather than, for me, which was going on the bow of the boat and sort of leading the way. It's a different kind of leading. It's almost like leading and supporting from the stern rather than from the bow. So when I landed at OT, I got to OT, and OT had quite the library of P3M3 guidance. So it's there. So, how do I use all this stuff? What does it mean to be a principal advisor, as a thought leader, with benefits and assurance and governance? And what I realized is, okay, we can do a certain amount of training as much as operational budgets would allow. But then what is my role with all these things already in place? And what I found is I was doing far more mentoring than, still the servant leader, but far more focus on mentoring, so that people learn and people are capable and they can move forward and answer their questions. So, sometimes I know people are frustrated when they come to me and they say, well, Patrice, what about this and this? And then usually I lead with another question. It's not about prescription, it's about, what's the situation here? What's the environment you're in? And what are the correct answers for this environment? So you will see me, as I said before, not giving people set questions, asking the things, and then using my experience to illustrate, here's a problem, here's how I handle it, and what are similarities. Would what I did before in the past work now? What works best for you? Um, and one of the things that I always make sure I tell people is that there are lots of experience around, but you always have to say, caution that there are no right answers. There are no forever right answers. It's what works for now and what continues to support the manner of the people that are there in that project team. So it's more these days about collaboration and discussion, and which I think links in a lot to what Rob had said when he's working from an organizational level. What I want you all to do is to start thinking of, from a personal point of view, what works, what is the management that works for you, style that works for you now and in the situation you find yourself in. All right. So it's a lot of thinking, and as I said before, I don't have a prescription, but it's all about making sure we continue to talk and collaborate together. So as I said before, my experience was really about being a director. I'm a project manager. Gotta get this thing out. To the servant leader, to saying, okay, all right, how is your capability being built? How is my capability being built? How is mana being built? And then moving across to the mentoring, where I'm focusing on people and making sure that they continue in their own evolution, never mind mine. But and I got there in the end. So here is my invitation for you to take time out in your very busy schedules. I know what it's like to be a project manager, and ask yourselves these things. What is the professional legacy that you would like to leave? That's one of the first things to ask yourself. And no judgment here. It could be about the people. It could be about the projects themselves. You may go on and build fabulous bridges and change the course of a region. But you have to find your balance point somehow between the people aspects of being a project manager and the project aspects of what you're delivering for the client. And then once you've sort of thought about what that balance is going to be, the next thing, of course, is what's the management style you need to adopt? And what's the funny thing about it is that you may find yourself in different situations where you will have to pick up a different management style that suits the situation. But in the end, or rather not in the end, the underlying fundamental thing will be, what is your core basic management style? And you need to make sure you're clear about it, because that's your foundation as a project manager, because it's going to be um, the underlying thing that like salt permeates everything that you do. All right. And once you've sort of given yourself a little bit of time, go for it. I encourage you to go for it. And that's pretty much what I'm encouraging to you. And I'm happy to hand over back to Scott and have a discussion talking about these management styles and what it means for you. Thank you.
I had not unmuted. I'm sorry about that. That was my fault. It's the classic conference call mistake. Everyone's madly thinking that something's gone wrong with their speakers, but it's not. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to ask for Rob. Tell us about how did you reflect on your management style when you went into Vietnam, or when you started to talk about open thinking? Or is this something that you said, this is my management style and it really works for me, maybe other people could benefit? How did you go?
That did exactly dovetail into what I was saying, Patrice. Thank you. Yeah. I was always a bit of a funky manager, I think. You have to ask people who work for me. But I was
Funky, like
scared.
as in funky
I was
smell. Is that
beginning to worry myself.
as in the hippie manager, but I did also work in an extremely punitive, directive organisation. So, yeah, people tell us off for using the term victims of a system, but victim is not the right word, they say. But I think people are victims of the system they work in, and managers are as much victims as anyone else, and they are driven to behaviours that are not natural for them. And that was very much my position as a manager, and was why I moved out of management, was because I didn't like the things I had to do because of the organisation I was in. Right. And
Cultural
so,
value matters a lot.
yeah, and sometimes you have to hang on to your own personal integrity, right? And that means moving.
yeah?
Yes,
I didn't
which is
leave
what
the
I did.
organisation, I have to say, but I moved out of management.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't so much about reflecting my own personal style, because I was always fighting that 20th century management system.
Do you think this starts at school, which are built off military environments, and then follows through into management, right? It all just comes up from the top, and there's a teacher at the front. They tell you what to do. You must do it right. If you don't, you go to the principal. Yeah, it's exactly the same. What is the difference? What is the difference between the school system that suppresses and the management styles that suppress? It's like, hello, I don't think that's funky or hippie to have that insight.
Yeah, it is systemic in our society, and one of the things that I look forward to is the evolution of society to understand complexity and to understand failure as a natural thing is something that, like, Patrice is now immersed in government, and one of the biggest challenges in government that I joke about is the Dominion risk. So the Dominion is the daily newspaper in Wellington, and people in government are just terrified of the Dominion. You must not get in the papers. So, and society is just so punitive about the tiniest government mistake just gets pilloried, and that makes it almost impossible to do anything in government, because everyone's terrified of Dominion risk, because there's no sympathy for failure in society to allow government to do anything innovative, because they're terrified of failing and getting hammered for it. And so socially, one day society has to get this stuff so that it trickles down into everything: systems of management, systems of government.
Patrice,
Can you
it sounds. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It sounds. Oh, sorry. You finish.
I just think
Sorry.
Patrice would know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that, every system, every framework, what have you, has its pros and cons. And one of the things that I would think I got out of my old-fashioned school training was, and it might have been just I was lucky with the teachers that I had at the time. But one of the things that I got out of it is that they taught me to think, and think in a structured way. So, for instance, one of the things that I've been working with OT is developing a very simple product where trying to capture in a structured way, and this is, yes, I'm putting back my project management hat, my assurance hat as well, to sort of to get around the Dominion risk is to be clear in a very structured way what's your line of sight from what was the original narrative that came out of a cabinet paper or minister's report or some other thing, where you of yourself need to make sure you understand your line of sight. So it's one of the sort of capability building things that I've done that says, don't change people's narratives. Narratives are what you have. But you need to be upfront for yourself. And again, this is where a manager, quote unquote, has a responsibility from, however they do it in management style. But I think it augments and is fundamental as well to being a sort of servant leader at the back of the walker, at the stern of the walker, rather than at the bow of the walker, where we sit down, we examine, okay, what are our assumptions whenever we're in a project? What are the underlying biases? How do you get from a narrative to a series of outputs and products and a benefit? And I think one of the things that I certainly am hoping I'm helping projects is to make sure they get that line of sight. And that's a very structured way of thinking. How you get to a structured way of thinking, I'm sure, Scott, we can have a whole separate session about structured thinking. But the idea is that as a manager, supporting people, making sure that they're capable, is being there to help them think their way through this. Where, okay, this is our, using a sort of militaristic thing, this is our mission. Okay, if you choose to accept it, and I think a lot of people know their mission impossible, because sometimes it feels like mission impossible when you start up.
But
But
it did.
idea is to get that line of sight. And this is one of the things that, as a sort of servant leader at the back of the walker, that you are helping them get that line of sight. So yeah, the old-fashioned way, might force you to be very analytical thinking. But as Rob has said, it's not only about analytical thinking and organizational structure. It is about, are you doing this with the people and their capability and performance, supporting their own development in mind? And I think this is where we can transition from the old world kind of thing to the new world that we're hoping to get to.
Because I definitely extracted from what you were saying that you tend to recommend employing the idea of not providing the solutions, but getting people to find the solution themselves, which is like super empowering, right? If you come out of a meeting with Patrice and go, wow, I worked out that problem. I solved that problem. Patrice helped me, but it was my solution.
Right.
And then that'll give them confidence to go forward.
People
I
don't
hope
resist
an
their own
example.
ideas.
I know it didn't make me very. Sorry, Rob. I know it didn't make me. It wouldn't have made me super and have lots of clients. But I always say, if I go in there and I do the best job, they don't need me afterwards. I can move on to something else.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that, Rob? What did you say?
I
missed
said
that,
people
yes.
don't resist their own ideas.
Correct. Correct. I'm taking that one down.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a freebie. That's an extra freebie.
That is the key to how we change or how we help them change how they work, is just we let them change it, right? In our clients. We get them all in a big room and we say, how could it look? But we unlock that by getting management out of the way, and one of the biggest parts is getting rid of the fear of failure, creating enough psychological safety in the organisation that people are
because
willing to do.
because one of the things about what I call the dominion risk is, if you can establish that line of sight, which is what I've been working on, is saying, well, think of the dominion problem as a risk that you've got to manage, or it comes from outside the environment. And if you are seeing that somebody is critiquing you or what have you, go back to that line of sight that you've just generated or I've helped you generate and see, okay, where does this affect your project? What assumptions need to be changed? And once you've got that sort of line of sight developed, it doesn't mean you're starting from scratch and, sort of panicked, oh my God, we've done the whole thing wrong and we have to start over. But to say, okay, where along the line, which assumption do we have to change? Because even that dominion risk is information. It's information. It's information that if you understand your original line of sight, it means that, okay, I think I know where I have to pivot and how do I deal and mitigate that risk, is all part of developing that line of sight, because that dominion risk is never going to go away.
Yep. And with that, we will conclude. So I just want to tell everyone, thank you so much for Rob and Patrice to coming along today. I appreciate you guys being involved. Now, a recording of this live stream will be made available to everyone, along with the request for you to provide some feedback about the event. Feel free to share this link with other people. Our next event is tomorrow in Wellington, where Rob's going to talk about Open IT and Patrick O'Doherty is going to talk about IRD digital transformation. So do come along for that. Thanks for coming. We look forward to seeing you at a future event. Ka kite whanau. Cheers, bye.
Ka kite.